We're going to be focusing on the decentralization part of things. We're going to be focused on what happens with solo stakers now. And it doesn't matter whether you're coming from the solo staker side or from the business side. You're going to have an overview in less than 10 minutes of everything that's coming and how the solo staker thinks and acts. All right. So what's coming ahead? Let's talk EIPs. EIP-4844, proto-dank sharding. Here's our friend the blob. What does it mean for solo stakers? It means 200 gigabytes more of storage over a period of 2 weeks. That's going to be permanent. This is closer than any state expiry solutions. So for the moment, that means harder hardware requirements for solo stakers. All right, next one. We're gonna put them together later on. That's why I'm explaining them now quickly. EIP-4788, beacon root in execution layer. Very interesting one. Trust minimized consensus data available for smart contracts to use. This is extremely exciting for all of these Oracle dependent LSDs. EIP-7002, triggerable exits from execution layer. Enough of these clunky signed exit messages to have trust that the node operator will correctly exit, and if you have a malicious node operator, enough. Huh? You have, yes, exactly. EIP-7251, increase max effective value. I am particularly excited about this one because you can compound your stake without penalizing small stakers. But this has a secondary effect. So, well, there's many good effects that everybody talks about. It's like, okay, well, you cannot have every computer in the world talking to every other computer in the world. There's just not enough networking to go around. So if we can reduce the amount of validators, because we can consolidate validators in more than 32 ETH, we don't need to go into increments of 32 ETH. What we can do is we can have a fewer amount of validator, fewer amount of attestations, fewer amount of messages to sign, and just overall lower network requirements. That's great. But it means that the search for the optimal validator set has begun. It means that if we have fewer validators to go around, there is a sort of an optimal range of validators that you want to find according to several parameters that you want to have. And these parameters could be purely on performance, which would be absolutely terrible, or it would be more on decentralization aspects. So right now we have Solo Staker as the gold standard of decentralization. And this is because it works in any country. We have different geopolitical locations, different jurisdictions, different ISPs, different power grids. That's amazing for decentralization. And it's small and nimble. It favors variety. And usually it goes for one validator, one node, or at least one node per very few validators, which gives a lot of resilience to the network, because if one node goes down, one execution layer, consensus layer pair goes down, the network doesn't really care. The network has like a very, very small downtime, or like it doesn't have any downtime, right? Now, more than 800K validators, and in 85 countries, and in 13,000 nodes, only 14,000, almost. But how many of you are aware of the Nakamoto coefficient? What is the Nakamoto coefficient? Anybody? Nakamoto coefficient? I've seen somebody saying yes over there. That's exactly correct. It is the amount of entities required to compromise the network. There you go. Somebody knows how to read. So that's exactly correct. And these, just like decentralization, it has several vectors, right? And we can take decentralization in terms of political vector, which in political here I'm not referring to being a Republican versus being a Democrat. I'm referring to which political entity owns this validator, and we would see that with Lido, when they got like 33% of the network, that became sort of quite dangerous, right? Because they can affect finality in some sort of way. So if we look at one specific type of decentralization or the Nakamoto coefficient in terms of countries, we can see this. United States has 37.28% of the nodes. This is brutal. That means the Nakamoto coefficient of Ethereum is 1 when it comes to countries. And more than 50% of the nodes are between 2 countries. That is disastrous. That is disastrous. And why the concentration? Because solo staking, which we uphold as the golden standard of decentralization, it has certain limitations. For example, you need 32 ETH in order to stake, which is a lot of money. So it tends to concentrate solo stakers into places where there's a lot of disposable wealth. A lot of the information as well is in English, and we use English as the industry standard for creating new papers, for new information. And before somebody translates it, there's a lot of trust in this translating age. Like basically a lot of information gets lost, or it doesn't never reach other places that do not use English as the main language. And finally, it's in these rich countries where the trustworthy internet connections and power grids. And even if Ethereum is on purpose very, very, very permissive with solo staker setups, people still want to feel like they don't want to be like half of the time offline, or they still prefer, or they still feel more confident in their setups when they're in certain countries. And yeah, solo staking is we've been focusing on solo staking, but traditional pools are not going to help because the Nakamoto coefficient for pools is 2, and they are also concentrating their servers into the same countries. All right, so we have the perfect storm that is brewing, and the perfect storm is a 4-tier combination that I will explain very, very quick. And the good thing is we can overcome these limitations, and they are already here. It's just pieces that we need to put together, right? So number 1 is liquidity. We need to put ETH into some sort of nodes, into some sort of validators, right? So we have all of these platforms that have ETH or have ways to acquire ETH, but now how can they trust the centralized validators? How can they trust node operators? How can we perform or give this ETH downstream? Well, communities. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, on this 4-tier, at the bottom we have communities that exist all over the world, communities that translate the content, as we were saying, communities that have the ability of pooling economic resources to acquire infrastructure or whatever they need. And in the middle, we have the hardware and the software bits. Okay, and thanks to DVT, we have the capability of, well, thanks to all of these together, we have the capability for communities to organize themselves, run different hardware, and thanks to DVT, have the same standards of reliability as a professional operator would be, or even a solo staker, which is the gold standard, would have on a normal and better setup in a rich country. And this is something that is happening already right now. There are communities running nodes all over the place, thanks to DVT, in Africa, in Latin America, and all these communities are spread out across the world, and they can gain access to base layer revenue. To base layer revenue, free from speculation, if you consider ETH as the base of internet money. And yeah, free from speculation, but at the same time, very, very low investments, because bond with DVT, you can even get rid of the bond entirely, and you have high exposure to the upside. You have this revenue coming into places where 0.001 ETH might be quite substantial. And here's how we get some redistribution of wealth. Those DVT clusters do not need hardcore hardware to be run on, and they can be run on low-powered machines like these three. This is not a satanic pentagram. This is actually a DVT cluster where we have two full nodes represented by those Dappnodes, one as a backup for the other, and then we have lower-powered machines that do not need to run a full node, and they can just sign by having key shares of a DKG, or basically key shares of a validator key. Let's look at LSDs. So LSDs tend to concentrate a lot, and they will be... They are now the way that how solo stakers can sort of bump up their revenue by participating, by they're putting their extra ETH onto some LSD, or by people that are not solo stakers yet to start participating in this. Now, LSDs have natural smoothing of rewards, and it becomes quite attractive for people to, instead of solo stake, they just put it into an LSD, because they know that they don't depend on luck. They're more or less going to get like a fairly average rate of reward. Now, we need to make solo staking attractive again, or at least staking by or community staking attractive again. We need to make it less dependent on the variance of the execution layer, which will become more and more important if we believe this bull market will come, right? So that's why at Dappnode we have created a smoothing pool for solo staking and for community staking, basically for independent no runners, right? And where you can smooth out all of your rewards. You can send all of your execution layer rewards in here, and you can smooth them out. Not only this, but you see this donate thing over here? This donate over here is a public goods funding mechanism. Anybody could fund directly every single solo staker that participates in the smoothing pool and bump up the revenue of all of these validators. Now, this is extremely exciting, because at all of a sudden, not only we have the chance, of course, it's still public goods, right? But we have the chance for do funding rounds and incentivize decentralization directly.
So would this funding goes to the smoothing pool or something?
So this funding goes straight, if you donate ETH to the pool, this gets distributed among every participant of the pool, like effectively bumping their APR on the execution layer rewards.
So if there is any kind of restaking yield for the solo stakers, it goes into this pool?
Yes, correct. That would be totally right. So that would be increasing the security, the restake security in here in some sort of way.
ETH or ETH plus ERC?
Only ETH. Yeah, there we go. Ethereum and Dappnode. So that's where I come from. Very quick. We have free open source software that allow people to run their own DVT setups or their own full validator setups in their own machines. We are a technological accessibility project that's going into economic accessibility project. That means that we try to bring ways of running validators to people that would not have the 32 ETH. And we have more than 3K validators self-reported as using Dappnode. And I say self-reported because that's what they have in the graffiti when they propose a block. They have the word Dappnode on it. But we have absolutely no telemetry. We have no way of knowing how many Dappnodes are out there. But we do know that we have around 228 million USD of solo stakers that have self-reported that use Dappnode, but there might be a lot more. And just a meme to finalize. On this next bull run, don't be the first guy. Okay, try to gain exposure to all of these increased execution layer rewards that you're gonna have. So don't don't be the first guy. TA, technical analysis, is not a thing. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.